Much of our time is spent either ruminating over the past or worrying what the future holds in store for us, and a phenomenon that I like to call the time traveler effect. On this week's episode of the Infusion BreakDown Show, the Breakdown crew sat down with a very special guest, the host of the Attention Collection podcast, Mr. Anthony Garcia, to discuss the nuances of why we struggle to remain present. Let's see what we came up with.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Infusion BreakDown Show. As always, it's your boy Joshua Freeman. I'm also here with Mr. Bryan Carey, also Desmond Tillman, and we also have special guest, Mr. Anthony Garcia from one half of the Attention Collection. How's everybody
How you doing?
Wonderful. I'm super excited about today's episode.
Good
I know I say that every week.
doing? Bryan, you can go and introduce the guest even more.
Sure. So today's guest, like you said, is Anthony Garcia, one half of the Attention Collection. He is also a speaker and author. I'm a huge fan of what these guys have going on, so be sure to check their operation out. We will be sharing links also in the description below.
What's up, everybody? I'm Anthony Garcia from the Attention Collection. And the Attention Collection is just about two things. Number one, you don't have to wait for your life. You don't have to wait till you've gotten that job, you've entered that relationship, your circle of friends is better than it currently is. Your life, this moment, is worth noticing. And the second thing is, there's no such thing as being self-made. We don't become ourselves by ourselves. We stand on the shoulders of so many people who have gone before, those we know and love, and complete strangers. Books we've read, things we've watched, stuff we listen to, it's all formative. The trick is to pay attention and to notice how we can integrate to become who we want to become. That's the Attention Collection.
So check it out.
All right, but you don't actually know him personally, right?
No. So,
Oh, okay.
well, yeah, this whole conversation that we're having today was brought about by a short exchange we had on Instagram. So I started following them, and I was a fan of their podcast. And they had created a post about being present. And so it really struck a chord with me. And so I had just commented on it. And then so Anthony challenged us to break that down. So when I put that on the outline for us to discuss things like topics that we're going to put on the outline for us, you had mentioned that this would be a good one to have a guest on. And I said, who else would be better to have than the person who challenged us in the first place?
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, welcome, Anthony.
Thanks.
But as for the question we have for today, why do we struggle to be present? That's the official question. So we do offer the guests the opportunity to go first if they would like. It's up to them now. Why do we struggle to be present?
I mean, there's probably a million reasons why individuals struggle to be present, but I think probably the primary reason we struggle to be present is because that requires a certain level of silence and awareness, which can be scary for most of us. I mean, if you think about life, we're always on the way somewhere. We're always tasked with things to do. And so in order to check in with what's going on in the present, we kind of have to intentionally slow things down. And I had this experience the other night where I was trying to watch something. It was like a course. It was some class, and I was watching that. But then I noticed every 2 minutes, my hand was going to my phone to scroll something. And so I'm doing this toggle between what I'm supposed to be absorbing and what I don't need to be, but I'm suddenly drawn to. I've done this with movies. I've done this in conversations with other people. So there are all these little triggers that hit us at any given point in our lives. And I think a lot of it, if we boil it down, we're scared to be in the moment. And I like to say we kind of toggle and vacillate between two things. We're either at a coffin or at a time machine at any given point in our day. We're hanging out next to a coffin or we're hanging out next to a time machine. What I mean by that is when you get in your thoughts, you're generally speaking thinking about the past. You're thinking about a conversation that you had, how it went, how it should have gone, the things you should have said, what they said that they shouldn't have said, how they should have phrased it. So that's the coffin. And I say the coffin because it's gone. That conversation is over. That past moment will never reemerge. Something like that might happen again, but that situation in and of itself is never going to happen again. So it's dead. It's gone. But it's as if you're at a funeral service They've done the memorial. They've focused. They've sung the songs. They've said the words. The eulogy has been presented. The final prayer has been given. But you're standing there and you will not budge. That's essentially what it is to ruminate and live in the past. And we do that all the time. We wish we could fix things, or we wish we could go back and redo it. Or we're standing next to the time machine. And what I mean by that is, how's this interview going to go? How's this conversation going to go? Will she say yes? Will he do this? And that a lot of times is packed with anxiety. And so the same thing that I just said about the past is also true about the future. That future doesn't exist. Chances are there might be some fragments of it, the way you spun it in your head, that actually happened, but it's a crapshoot because it's going to change in so many different ways. And most of the time, the things we stress out about that happen in the future don't pan out that way, but we spend so much of our lives hanging out there. And I think it's almost a point of addiction. It's almost a point of, we need to know what's going to happen, or we need to know why what happened. And so we're struggling between those two places. And when we do that, it's almost impossible to actually be in the present moment. So.
No, I love the analogy you made with the coffin and the time machine. I was reading your book, and so in chapter 2, you discussed you explored the parallels between the penguins at the Pope Penguin Conservation Center.
Yeah.
Don't know why I said ducks. And then the penguins in the roundabout. And so what is the consequence of us not being present, as you just displayed?
Man, I'm a father and I have 3 kids. And back when you used to be able to go out of your house with your family before quarantine hit and you could do things in public spaces, I was at this park, and my kids were climbing up on the swings and doing everything else. And I looked over and I saw this dad holding his child on the monkey bars. But the comical part about it, the father was there, he was holding his child, he was present, but literally the entire time the kid's struggling across the monkey bars, this dad is looking at his phone, one thumbing, scrolling something. And I was like, dad is here, but dad's not here. Dad's just actually not in the building. And so I think we're just allergic to the present moment for so many different reasons. And a lot of people do it because they hide from anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety that is around being physically present. But I also think, and this could spin into a completely different side of the conversation that you may or may not want to go into, but I think there's an addictive component to where we are in society. It was hard enough to focus before cell phones and before social media and before all those things, but that stuff has literally been designed to keep us scrolling. That's their job. That's what they spend hours of research and innovation into, is to keep us scrolling. And they do a really good job with it. So it's hard.
A lot of what you said about those choices being driven by anxiety was echoed in another podcast I was listening to on last night. So the term was coined, was the guy who came up with the term FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And there's another one called FOBO, which he also coined in the same article when he wrote that, as fear of better option. And so it's something along the lines of where you, due to your fear of having a better option that you don't currently have, then you're paralyzed by fear or anxiety and end up making no choice. So that ends up being worse than FOMO, because FOMO can drive someone to do something. Like you can see, let's say I see you with your podcast and I can say, well, I want to get up and do it. I've always wanted to do that. That can be positive. That can be a positive drive and influence me to do something like that. Whereas FOBO, fear of better option, is just like you aren't making any movement. You're stagnant.
Right.
Anthony, first and foremost, man, that was very well articulated to where everything resonated with me, and I think everything will resonate with everyone who watches this as well. But really, a lot of what Anthony said is what my sentiments were. Just for me in particular, I remember, 3 or 4 years ago when I first started going through therapy, and it was so much. I thought everything that was bothering me was anger related. Like I couldn't figure out where the anger was coming from, but I would just go to the therapist and I would talk, and nothing would resonate with me. So I stopped going. And then probably about 6 months later, I started going again, and I had a different therapist. It was this guy. And, when I told him what I was feeling at the time and the barrage of emotions that I was going through, we focused more on our past. And what he was trying to get me to see is that typically when you're experiencing depression or things of that nature, you're reliving things from the past, or you're trying to go back and do everything, or you're trying to move forward in the present by doing everything in the opposite of what you had done it in the past. In a sense, you're trying to prove to somebody that you can do it this way, instead of proving to yourself that you can get it right. And then he also said that with the anxiety that you're feeling, as far as the fear of the uncertain, that's what just, your fear of failure altogether. It doesn't matter if it's work related, school related, or just your overall life. The anxiety that comes with life is typically you living ahead of what the present is currently offering. And I think the best way that I can put that is, because I'm a parent too, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is I think a lot of us not living in the moment is a product of our parents constantly pushing the importance of things and how they will essentially reward you in the future instead of rewarding you in the current moment. Because I could always remember, my mom always preaching education, but it was never her preaching education for what I could receive at the current moment, whether it been like National Honor Society or, potential clubs, like even, when it comes to like job stuff, like if you wanted to go CIA, FBI, or any of your top tier agencies, you have to go in with a 3.2, but that stuff isn't preached to you. It's more or less just like, you have to get this education, not knowing why you have to get the education. So it kind of creates this hamster wheel of just constantly trying to think ahead of something that you just cannot necessarily fathom, for one, or two, understand in the sense of why you're doing it. So I think our inability to kind of understand that the why is always going to be kind of like a present / past tense feel, instead of a futuristic trait itself.
Can I jump in on that real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Desmond, man, you really got my wheels turning when you were talking about kind of future-oriented thinking, because that is literally the construct of the school system as it stands. It is, not only is it stacked with other layers, it's economically driven for future, capitalistic gains, but it really, and now there are great teachers. There are fantastic teachers who celebrate the accomplishments of students in the here and the now, and there are parents who do the same. And they, it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's both. But the fact that it's all about getting to the next grade or getting the marks that are coming the following quarter, or ultimately to get that diploma, certificate, whatever it is, so that you can pass, that's where so much student anxiety lives, is these marks that are yet to come. Or did this grade over here jeopardize my life 6 years from now? That is just a minefield of anxiety waiting to happen, rather than what are we learning right here in this moment. And that's why when you let students or anybody learn something with their own hands in the here and now, without a grade, without, there's not going to be a grade at the end of this. There's not going to be any ramifications. We're just going to learn this. I think people enjoy that a lot more and take more away from that, because the fear of the future outcome is nowhere to be found. And I think the same lies in relationships. For those who are taught, or at least it's in the groundwater, that we're supposed to pursue a partner for marriage or whatever, all of the dating life is littered with this emotional fear of what's next. What's the next date going to hold? And is this going to lead somewhere? Where's this going? And so it's all about this trajectory towards a marriage that may or may not happen, when you could just be at that date tonight in this moment. So I think that future oriented thought that you put out there is huge in this conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I never considered those exact reasons. My explanation that I came up with for why we struggle to be present was, there's typically, like Desmond was saying, there's an emotional attachment to it. We typically perceive the past, whether it be a particular event, the nature of a relationship we once had, to be better than what we currently have presently. And so we always look backwards. Or in the opposite direction, we could be more future sighted. So if somebody's really ambitious, or they're not satisfied with their current situation, they may not be tethered to the past, but they're tethered to the future. They're not realistic. They're not thinking about what they need to do now. And we all fall victim to both of those, I feel like. And I really struggled with that myself, but I was able to make peace with my past with the concept that I spoke on another episode we just did, the concept of serving myself. So it comes about from me feeling like I haven't done everything that I wanted to do in the past, or there's conversations that I could have said to help preserve relationships or mend them. And those things that were left unchecked off. So as I went back and started to be mature and check those off, because at one point in time it was more so like a pride thing, to where I felt like if I was initiating that, then the person would have an air of superiority because I was the one doing that. But I thought about it, it's like my only responsibility is to serve myself. If I do what I want to, then I know then I'll be happy, like regardless of the outcome. And so some people might frame that as at least you know this happened or at least this. I don't like framing things that way because that seems like, I mean, of course it sucks. If things don't work out for you, it sucks. But by me saying that I did what I wanted to, that's all I need. That's the most powerful thing you can do as a human being, is to set up to what you want, do what you want to do, and get it done.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think another idea or another area that this is very much present is kind of like with fitness itself. Like everybody is obsessed with this image of what they want to look like, not understanding one, their body composition, you know, the nutrition that goes into it, and then the lifestyle change that is a result of it. Like a lot of people look at these fitness gurus and they want to follow the plan, but they don't realize that a lot of your rest and recovery isn't always about the supplements. It's about the sleep. So I'm making sure you're getting that 7+ hours of sleep a night, so your body can properly recover, so your muscles can grow at an increased rate in comparison to if you're sleeping just 5 or less. Like that's a lot of people don't want to sit here and analyze their life for what it is in the present to kind of benefit what their future could potentially hold. And I think a lot of people are just so struck with, you know, a futuristic idea of what they can look like, and they just go and they go, you know, typically with no guidance, no direction. They just find one thing that they've seen works for everyone else, and then they just take that route. Because I think when you kind of take the time out to understand your body composition, what diet works for you, and then what regimen as far as, you know, time you want to wake up, time you want to go to sleep, things of that nature. When you actually sit down and you think about it, and you get the enjoyment of putting each individual building block in the place in the current moment, you see your results a lot faster than what you were kind of thinking, you know, just looking at like, oh man, you know, I wonder how long it took them to get their body. It's like, no, I understand what I can understand. Now I actually know how long it's going to take me to get my body or my goals per se. So I think, you know, fitness is definitely one, because you're always kind of looking at somebody else. There's always a comparison of what could be instead of where you're currently at.
And I think working out wise too, you know, it's the same future oriented idea where, you know, I started this week and I'm like, literally, you see people in the gym, they'll work out. It's their first weekend. It's January 5th or whatever, right? And they're already looking in the mirror after reps. Like nothing is going to show up. Like you haven't been here long enough. And so they get discouraged because 2 weeks in, they don't look like that person on Instagram, or they don't look like the fitness guru whose book they read or whose course they bought or whatever, rather than framing it that yes, there is a benefit to having goals. There is a benefit to saying, I want to see these results in the future. That's fine. It keeps people going. But that can also keep people away because people don't see those results immediately. So what would it look like to frame the workout as like, today's workout, my goal is heart rate related, because that's something I can control in the here and in the now, and I can see the results of that in this moment. That's why sometimes those, you know, Fitbits or, you know, on your Apple Watch or whatever it might be, that's why those pedometers can be so effective, because it's not showing you what you're going to look like in 2 weeks. It's telling you, you didn't get enough steps in today. Like, let's work on today, and then we can talk about tomorrow when it comes. So I think that's absolutely right, man. Yeah.
Spot on. And Josh, I know you can kind of relate to this when we were, well, I was, but you're currently still in the behavioral health field. You know, kind of when it comes to implementing that ABA treatment, and you kind of have those worrisome parents to where they feel like their child isn't where they should particularly be, or if they're relapsing on a lesson. It's that fear of moving backwards per se, instead of understanding that, well, no, they're moving backwards a little bit because we're putting more emphasis on a certain lesson or a certain we'll just leave it at certain lesson. You're putting more emphasis on a certain lesson. And I think like a lot of parents, when it comes to ABA therapy or just therapy in general, they're always putting on like a where I want my kid to be per se, instead of understanding what goes into getting their kid from where they once were to where they currently are now. Because I know for a fact, when I was doing it, a lot of parents like to micromanage and say, oh yeah, he wasn't having that issue last week. Like, is he starting to have these issues again? And it will never be a thing to where, you know, the kid is struggling. But just like as regular human beings, when we're learning something new, that is our primary focus. So our ability to kind of recall what we might have learned, you know, a year or two ago on the spot, or even last week on the spot, isn't going to be as sharp as what we are currently trying to attain now.
Yeah, exactly. I've come in contact with that definitely a lot, especially parents being fearful of like, oh, is he regressing? What's going on? Should we be worried about this? Lately, I come in contact with it as far as like kids on medicine, like they try new medicine and be like, oh, well, should we take him off this medicine? Like, hold on, we gotta hold on. Let's see how it reacts first, and then how he is. Everybody has a bad day, you know. Everybody isn't feeling good one day or something like that, but you just it's about consistency, you know. So that's how it goes.
100%.
Practice that people have been keeping up with more often now to focus on being present is the practice of gratitude journaling. So just like Dondre was in there a few weeks ago, he's been doing a gratitude journal. And here at the Attention Collection, you guys have an initiative called May We Be Present. And so my first question is, what happens in June? Like, so what are you going to do then?
That's it, man. We're moving on. Like, if you're not grateful after May's over, we got nothing for you. Just keep moving. No, honestly, we're finding that really the undergirding message of a lot of what we say comes down to awareness. And I think awareness and living in the present go hand in hand. I mean, if you are an aware person, if you are practicing consciousness and mindfulness on any kind, whatever it might be, an intentional meditation practice or whatever, you are going to live more in the present moment. And the benefit of living in the present moment is gratitude. I think that's a natural landing place, because the paradox is a lot of us, like I said a minute ago, we're fearful of the present moment. But the strange thing is, more often than not, there's not a lot of suffering in the present moment. If I'm being physically injured right now, or, you know, I've strained myself too hard or something like that, or I'm ill or something, yes, there's suffering in this present moment. But if we really think about it, a lot of our stress, anxiety, worry, doubt, fear, shame, all of that stuff exists in other places. It exists in the past because of stuff that has happened, or exists in the future because of things I'm worried about happening. So I think the natural benefit of being present is when you do, you look around, and even in the midst of quarantine and everything else that's going on, killer, you know, hornets coming over now, like all this crazy stuff we got to worry about. Now, if I'm present, if I'm in this moment, now that exchange that I had with somebody, you know, when I get off of this podcast and I really comb through my day and reflect on this conversation, I can be grateful for it because I'm aware of it. I think more often than not, one day melts into another. You know, especially when we're working from home and doing life differently, sometimes you don't even know what day it is anymore. So the key of an awareness practice is like, no, somebody texted me today, something so stupid, it wasn't even that meaningful, but because I noticed it, because I was aware of it, it did something for me. I heard a song, I watched something, I had some kind of exchange, I had an insight. I was taking a shower and a creative problem that I was trying to solve for 6 months just popped into my head. I woke up this morning from a dream and it gave me an insight. Let me just jot that down. If you start doing stuff like that, you will find gratitude. And I think really gratitude is the antidote to stress and anxiety. I think there are a lot of people with chemical imbalances and certain things that are a lot harder. And I do not want to even pretend like that's not an issue for a lot of people. It's not a one size fits all in terms of how we cope with stress and anxiety and depression and things like that. But more often than not, this gratitude practice can help us to see that, man, this life actually is worth living. And it's not because I've hit the financial goals that I want. It's not because all my relationships have lined up. It's because the more I lean in and the more I pay attention, my life actually is valuable. And so may we be grateful is kind of our attempt to dip our toe into the water of mindfulness and get people thinking about it. Because I think there's a lot of people right now who are wired to pursue these kinds of things. And then there's a big segment of society that thinks it's too far out there. They're going to have to start going to yoga every day, or they have to adopt a certain religion. And so what would it look like to just slowly integrate some of these things to be a little bit more mindful? So that's basically what it is. It's kind of just like taking beginning steps towards that end, to trying to help people get handles on why there is really so much to be grateful for. So
I love that. I really want to participate in the prompts whenever I see them, but you guys post very insightful ones, and it's really hard to think about specific answers, because you ask, like, for example, what are you grateful for today? And it's really hard to think like on the moment, but then it'll come to my mind later on as I move throughout the day. So it's like you're still triggering those thoughts in people, which is great. And so on the topic of yoga, so that's part of my morning practice. I do that on just about every day. And I typically find it's easier for me to be present and pay attention to how my body feels, my breath, the sensations that I'm feeling while I'm doing the poses, the saunas on the mat, when I'm doing something new. When I get into a routine, I'm starting to do the same video over and over and over again. It's like a sense of familiarity washes over me, and my mind starts to wander. So is that something that you guys have experienced as well, to where as things become more routine to you, that you begin to take it for granted and not to be as present minded? And how do you go about fighting that? Do you find that it's easier to catch your mind drifting when you're in a routine or something that's very monotonous that you're used to doing, very cyclical?
I think it's definitely a byproduct of it, because I know for a fact that over the past 2 years that I've kind of 2 or 3 years since around the time I had my son was when I really became more cognizant of what I was thinking, because I didn't want my old childhood issues that never was really traumatic, but they were things that always kind of bit at me, as far as maybe how my parents parented me a little bit. So it was always one of those things where I always wanted to catch myself when I was thinking about something that could inflict, negative patterns moving forward. So I definitely will say I was more cognizant when I began to kind of address my thoughts, because typically when you're in that routine, you're already preparing yourself for what's next. Like, you're going through and you're checking things off as you're doing it, but because you're so indoctrinated with that routine, you're able to know what's coming next. And when it's something that doesn't match what is a normalcy with your routine, you're able to check it right then and there. Like, even present day, I'm not as sharp as I once was, because quarantine, like I told you guys about 4 or 5 episodes ago, that it has definitely thrown my pattern off altogether. But I'm always able to catch myself when I'm in that negative thought, process or pattern, whatever it may be, and kind of check it. Like, I'm not as sharp as I used to be, to where I can instantly flip those negative thoughts into positive thoughts, but I'm at least able to check it to where it's not running wild, and a depressive state of what used to be 8 hours is now trimmed down to 30 minutes.
yeah, I think for me, it's a lot about muscle memory. I think, Desmond, you kind of touched on this with the topic a minute ago, but when you're learning something new, there's a mind-body integration that is absolutely necessary, or you're going to fall, or you're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to mess up. And so you have to bring your whole self to that in order to figure out how to do it. But once you've mastered that, it's autopilot. You don't have to think about it anymore. And so that creates room for daydreaming. That's why when you're in the shower, I said it a minute ago, you get 10,000 ideas, because your body knows where to grab the soap. Your body knows, you know what I'm saying? It just is an autopilot response, so that we just naturally do things while we're thinking about 10 other things. And so when you've done this yoga practice, at first, if it's strenuous or if it stretches you in a way that you're not comfortable being stretched, you have to show up fully. And so there's no place for you to daydream or drift. Or if you're, playing sports of any kind and you have to be on, you're not sitting on the bench, you have no choice but to be fully present. If you're lifting weights, whatever it is, you're running on a treadmill, on some level, yes, you can drift to autopilot. You don't want to drift too far, you're going to be on your face. And so I think autopilot is a big issue. Muscle memory is a big issue. But the cool thing for me is there's also a practice, and this can be applied in many different veins, but it's this practice of beginner's mind. Because most of us have figured out our daily lives. We've figured out our routines. We've figured out what it is that we're going to do at any given point in the day. So that's where we drift. That's why we can't be present, because we're not doing, if you're the kind of person who's one morning you wake up, you might be on a plane over here and you might be doing this crazy activity. I'm going to go climb a mountain over here. And then you're somebody who's always living in the present. But if you're like us right now in quarantine, especially, you are just doing monotonous things that you could do in your sleep. So of course you daydream. Beginner's mind, though, is intentionally going back to standard practices that you're used to and looking at them from a different way. What would it look like if I'm doing this activity for the first time? So right now, this week, I have twin daughters, and I took both of their training wheels off their bike this week, and they're learning how to do it, and they've crashed and they've bit it. They have to be fully present on that bike, or they've seen skinned up knees, they're going to fall. And the thing for me is I know how to ride a bike. I don't have to think about it, but watching them learn it all over again, I'm having to think about the stuff you have to focus on when you learn to ride a bike. So it's like I'm riding a bike again for the first time. Well, what does that look like with your work life? What does that look like with your relationships? What does that look like with your friendships? What would it look like if I approached a conversation with somebody I've talked to a million times as if it was my first time? What kind of questions would I ask them if I wanted to get to know them a little bit more? And those kinds of little practices that you can fold in make it kind of fool that muscle memory. It fools that kind of going through the motions vibe. And it's hard to do because you have to be intentional about it, but it can really make a significant difference, I think, at least in my experience.
I would say when you guys are talking about, I haven't really struggled being present. For the last 2 weeks, I have become, I guess, too in touch with the present, I guess you could say, because I've learned really early that I'm not going to focus too much on the future because it always fell flat on my face. Like I always think about what I was supposed to get or what I'm going to get in the future, and it will always all fall flat on my face. So I would never think about, so I always catch myself when it comes to think about the future. When I grow up dealing with like past relationships, I focus more on the past, but then I was like, okay, forget it. That's the past. Well, I'm moving on. So I've dealt with that. So I really catch myself when it comes to not really being present, because I know like, okay, I have to do this to get to X, Y, and Z, So I don't really have that, but really for the last 2 weeks, I've been really too lax, really partially because I've been tired, but really because I've just been so in touch with like, oh man, I got this social distance thing going on. I'm really got to talk to him. I can just play my game, do what I got to do, play online. So I just been really too much into the present, where I've been like not focused on like my videos or not been recording as much as I want to or something like that. But not really too much, because I've learned early on, like, I can't focus too much on the future because it's always fall flat on my face. And I'm like, nah, it becomes this bigger disappointment to me. And I'm like, no, I got to focus more on the present to work to get to what I want to do. And those things that I want to do is what I love to do. So, and what I want. So,
Anthony, which of the two did you struggle with the most? Past or present? Past or future?
Man, if I'm honest, I find myself in different seasons struggling with both on some level. I think I'm more future averse because, I'm thinking of my creative life, things that I want to put into the world and stuff. And I can have conversations with people who already didn't like it, and I haven't even made it. So it's like that I'm having conversations with people who are critiquing this, and they're, it didn't work for them, or they misunderstand. And so I can have these hypothetical conversations in my head with stuff that I have yet to put into the world. And the problem with that is it has undoubtedly stifled writing efforts. It's undoubtedly stopped me from doing meaningful work because of whether it's critique or fear of failure. That's a big one. Fear of failure. Like, what if this doesn't work? And what if this doesn't land? And what if people don't resonate with this? And so all of those what ifs, man, they can just pile on you to such a point that it just cripples you from doing anything. And the ridiculous thing is, take writing, for instance. Generally speaking, you're not going to just give out, whether it be on the internet or send out anywhere, your first attempt at something. You're going to write it. You're going to think about it. You're going to show it to people you trust. But the resistance shows up so early on into the process that it can often stifle you from even trying. So there's good ideas that are in a graveyard somewhere, for, I think, a lot of us, just because the what ifs of the future weighed heavily. So I like I said, I don't love it, but there's times in my life where I do both. But I think future fear is probably the biggest thing that has hindered me in my experience.
Joshua, you about to say something?
I was about to ask you, what about you?
Oh, which of the two do I struggle with?
Yeah.
Prior to about, I say the beginning of this year, would definitely be the past. But as I started to go about the process of, like I said, serving myself and starting to check off those things that I hadn't done before, that I felt that there was still work to do, or there was still a possibility, like, what if I do this? Or I never took the time to apologize to this person because of this, or, it may have been glossed over, or maybe never directly addressed it. And then as I did those things, I start to feel less and less regret for the past. Like, if anything I do miss about the past, it would be the presence of certain individuals, namely my grandmother, who passed last year, and then my dad, who he doesn't live in Virginia anymore. He moved to Georgia about 4 or 5 years ago, around then. And just missing where we were all, like, the family was in closer proximity, and I was able to see them, like, just drive 2 hours away and go visit, hey, how's everybody doing, give them hugs and stuff like that. And then also the nature of the relationships I had with other people that are no longer in my life anymore for one reason or another. But as of now, I'm definitely more future minded, because I'm really excited for what the future has to bring. Like, what we have going on as an operation as a team, the three of us, and then my personal endeavors. But I would say that I'm definitely bounds and strides beyond what I was when it came to being present. Like, as a part of adopting the yoga practice, which I picked up maybe, I want to say, a year and a half or 2 years ago, that was tremendous as I began to rehab and facilitate my mind and be more intentional about my thoughts and where I was driving my energy. And so, with that being said, I think I'm doing much better when it comes to being present. But at current present moment right now, I do struggle with thinking about the future a little bit more, if I had to pick one of the two.
What does your future look like?
What does my future look like?
Yeah.
Dude, there's so many possibilities. So my future, ideally, I want to, on my deathbed, I want to know that all my ideas were materialized. All my feelings were materialized as well. All the people around me, they know how I felt about them. Everything that I wanted to do was accomplished. I want to have no regrets about that. I want to be remembered as the best son, brother, friend, in the future, father, husband, that I knew I could have been. And I also want to be, this is something I strive to do on a personal basis every day. I want to be someone who a younger me would be proud of. I think about, like, what would Bryan, 7-year-old Bryan, if I told him what I was doing today, would he be proud of it? If no, why am I doing it? Like, I feel like a lot of things that we talk about, they can't really resurface. So the topic of, like, falling in love with your inner child again. So drawing back to that idea is that as a child, I feel like that's the most pure version of ourselves. We know what our intents and desires are. The things that naturally captivated us are things that we should be doing. We should be fixated on those. And as we grow and mature, we tend to stray away from those. But the people who fall in love with their child, they start to pick up their hobbies again. They start to enjoy life more. Those are the people who are being more true to themselves. And so I want to be someone who little Bryan was proud of, who he would be proud of. And with the podcast, I was just speaking with Anthony prior to you guys getting on today. We were thinking about, like, what's the long-term goal for this? And so this is part of a multi-tier plan that I have and we've all been working on this together. But my ultimate goal is to have a platform to where I can put the people around me in positions to succeed, and just make sure everybody is able to materialize their ideas and just bring the best out of people around me. So I mean, I know that may have been a vague answer because I'm still figuring it out, but I think I'm really excited for the future.
I think what's underrated is about what people miss most about the past is them not having to actually think about the future, just being a carefree kid and just not having to think about what do you have to be when you grow up or what your GPA is going to be or what college you have to get into. So I just think just being like a carefree kid, and I don't mean like, because you probably start thinking about college probably like middle school or something like that. I mean like elementary school, you outside playing with your friends, hide and go seek, all of that. So I just think that's underrated, just something, just being a carefree kid, you know.
I know we speak about goals because as part of like what we do, we're a team, but we're also friends. Like we talk about stuff that's not even podcast related. And I'm curious, what are your guys' futures look like? Aside from the obvious goals we discussed, maybe you want to share that with Anthony as well.
Bryan, what you said, well, everything you said about being remember and being how little Bryan wants you to see is like he's proud. I think that's kind of dope. I'm not gonna lie. So I think that's dope. But really, what my future looks like, I want to say is 6-0 in the finals with 6 MVPs, and niggas still saying I'm second best. I would say that's what it looks like. To be honest with you, probably not getting the credit I think I deserve, but it is what it is. I'll still be the GOAT.
Go to
For
what?
me,
Go on, Des.
no, I think Bryan, you asked him a question.
Yeah, I said the goat at what?
Oh, what I do, movie reviews, everything I do, anything I attempt that in my life, editing, all of that. I didn't hear your question, Bryan. My bad.
You're good. Go ahead, Des.
For me, I really had everything planned out at an early age. Like coming into high school, I was like, I only want to be able to date one girl. I want this girl to be the girl that I marry. Things of that nature. Like I had very, very high, what we would deem now unrealistic expectations on what I wanted to do. When I got in a relationship, I had everything planned out of how I wanted it to go, and I kind of did it. And then when it came to school, I always said, this is exactly what I want to do and how I want to get there. But what I'm essentially saying is, as you kind of pan this stuff out, you kind of realize that it never really goes as you expect it to. And if you go into something with an expectation, you kind of put a clamps on yourself on your ability to react appropriately in the present moment. So when I'm thinking about that, I say all that to say, whatever my future holds, the day when everybody comes to my funeral, if I haven't lived a life to where Frank Sinatra's "I Did It My Way" can play on repeat at my funeral, then I know I didn't live life the right way. Like, I don't care what it is. Like, I was able to get to a point where, and I talked to my dad about this probably a month or two ago, where I kind of got to a point where I corrupted my mind and I stopped thinking about people's expectations for me as far as parental stuff. I stopped thinking about my expectations as far as what I put on myself, and I just started doing things. So I started doing things in the sense of where, like, I wanted to get the genuine feel of doing it instead of trying to consistently do something to get the feel of the accomplishment that might not come. So, one thing that I always say is, like, I don't ever want to do anything half-heartedly. Like, there's a lot of times where even with this podcast, I have ideas, but if I can't commit myself 100% to it, then I don't present that opportunity to anyone, because I don't want it to ever be to where I'm doing something in life that is at somebody else's expense or at somebody else's expectations, because I'm never going to truly be proud of what comes from it. So, I just want whatever life I do live for it to be fruitful, and for everything that happens, it happens because I structured everything for it to happen that way, instead of me kind of thinking and setting unrealistic expectations for myself.
Yeah, for me, I don't have success goals in terms of from a numerical standpoint or from an output standpoint. Like there are things that I would like to see in the world that I've created. There are goals in that respect, but for me, success has more to do with the person I've been, the way I've carried myself in the world. As a parent, I want, I feel like I will have been a successful father if my kids at my funeral, they don't need to get up and say, oh, dad, achieved this, or dad provided this for us to live in. And none of that stuff matters to me, to be honest. But if they say without a shadow of a doubt, they knew every day of their lives that they were loved by me, that I saw the value in them and pointed it out to them on a regular basis, that I set them up to be who it is that they want to be, that I didn't give them my expectations, that I didn't try to live vicariously through them, that my wife, feels like she was honored in a partnership where it wasn't, she was chasing me. There was no subservient role, but it was a partnership shoulder to shoulder, and that we lived and loved well. I think if people think back on my home as a safe place to sit around a dinner table, it doesn't matter who's at that table, but if you're at that table, you feel loved and served and welcome. Those are the things that I think stand the test of time and move on. I think there are books and there are films and there are, businesses and corporations and things that have lived long past the person who participated in them. But at the end of the day, that stuff is going to be forgotten. It just is. There are classics in literature that literally no one is talking about. There are films that have changed people's lives that most people have never seen. So I think to go after those goals can be great, but I don't want to hang my life on those things. I want the people who are in my circle, the people I came in contact with, to feel like they were around somebody who showed up fully present for them. That's a lofty goal, and I don't know if I'm doing it well right now, but that's something that I hope I can aspire to as time passes, for as long as I have to be here.
That's dope. That's dope. Desmond, you have any questions? No? You want to add something, Bryan?
I could have swore Desmond had a question. I saw the pencil going.
I thought I did. I thought I did too, but I was like.
So part of that was me writing down my grocery list. The other part was.
So you weren't being present.
No, I did. I wrote another one down too. We kind of already moved on from it, but I think we've talked about this before, but another thing that people struggle with, and I think it's the biggest thing that people do struggle when it comes to being present, is our economy is such a fast-paced, needs-based economy to where people are often, stuck in the mindset of being in survival mode, as far as you have to have this money to make ends meet, and you're constantly stressing about not having that money, thus causing you not to kind of be able to understand what it means to be in that survival mode. Because I think a lot of people, because this is just speaking from my mom's perspective, she grew up in an impoverished area, has just made or just put on captain in the U.S. Navy. If you guys don't know, she's a 1%er as far as Black women that have accomplished this role in the Navy. She will tell you that, like, a lot of things, when you get comfortable with your environment, not in the sense of being comfortable where you're at, but if you actually strip yourself of all those stressors and you actually just enjoy the people around you, a lot of people that are in that impoverished environment, you can have the most honest, open, naked conversations with them, and you actually just get to see how much they truly enjoy others' company. Whereas if you're always stressing on the money, or stressing over the money, then you're never actually truly present to enjoy your family that you currently have and enjoy them while they're there. And then I think, when you get to that point of economic fulfillment, if you constantly been stressed the entire time, chances are you're not actually able to sit there and be gracious of what you've accomplished, because you always think there's a what's next. And I can definitely see that on my mom's side, because she's been the one that enjoys the environment, but she's always been the what's next person. Like, for her, she's got her master's degree from UNF, University of North Florida, in 2015. 2 years later, she's getting another master's degree from, university or whatever is University of Dartmouth or Dartmouth College or whatever. And then 2 years later, now she's putting on captain. Like, it's always been a what's next thing with her, to where undoubtedly she hasn't had a time to sit back and soak in her accomplishments, because she's always been in the future mindset. Because right now she's put on captain, but right now she's already thinking about retirement. She still has to do 2 to 3 more years before she can even retire. But right now she's not even able to soak up all the goodness that comes with that. Like, yeah, people tell you congratulations, you're able to sit back and kind of, have a recall over what's happened over the past 35 plus years of your career, but you're not able to actually sit there and have that honest moment with yourself about what this truly means to you. And I think, just being in the economy that we're in, to where everything is solely based on what you have versus what you don't have financially, it's very, very hard for people to be present. Because even in our current situation, a lot of us, are 25 and below. Like, yeah, you're able to enjoy life, but it's always that what if? Like, what if I don't accomplish my goals? What if I don't have the money to pay rent next month? Like, you're always thinking about a what if until you get to that point to where there is no longer a what if, and you're actually able to just do.
I think what you were saying about the economy and the way that people are oriented, it's like almost a continuation of what we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that could be solved and alleviated outside of the current situation that we're all experiencing right now with the solution that we posed today about being present. So the idea, there's an old anecdote about the ants and the grasshopper, to where the grasshopper put off preparing for the winter, but the ants were always industrious and they were always preparing. So by us being present in everything that we do, so there's a season for preparation. By us doing that wholeheartedly and focusing on that, when these tough times come, we're ready for them. And like, this is an anomaly. We've never been hit by anything like this before. But I think that's definitely the answer to a lot of our problems, is being present.
And I think there's when it comes to money, when it comes to finances, I think it's been proven. I think some people say money can't buy happiness, but that's actually not true. Money, to a certain extent, can buy happiness. Like, if I'm shivering cold outside, naked in the rain, and I don't have clothing, I don't have a house to live in, my family's in abject poverty, I'm not going to be happy. It's going to be very hard for me to be present and focused when I'm trying to get food for my mouth and for my kids' mouth. But once you get somebody in a home, once you get somebody with their own roof, and they have a certain level of financial independence in and of themselves, that happiness is really at a peak. That's why there's no really difference. They've measured this. They've done studies. There's no real difference between one billionaire and a 2 billionaire. Like, at some point, the happiness quotient just dies out. It's not as if you get 1 more billion. Okay, finally, I've arrived. That's just not a thing. Like, once you get stuff taken care of, where you don't have the financial stress of the what ifs, if something falls off tomorrow, if the car breaks down, or, well, how am I going to pay for college? All of that stuff. Once that's taken care of, there's no comparison to how happy a person is going to be financially. But we believe in this idea of more. Like, we believe that more is the solution. The problem is, once you catch more runs past. And so you're holding more, but more just kept running. You're like, wait a second, I thought I had more. And so you drop that more and you're going to chase that more, and you just never will be happy. And I think it's what you said, Bryan. I think the cure to that on a very big level is being present in this moment. Like, yes, I need to make sure we can financially afford to survive. That's a given. And that should be applicable to everyone. We should all be able to find that place. We got to create systems that allow for that to happen, for people to be able to thrive on that level. But past that point, instead of just the hustle, grind, I have to get this number. What about today? What output did I do today? Am I thinking about what I currently have today? Because if I can't do that, there's nothing that's going to be put in front of me that I'm going to be satisfied with for any real stretch of time.
Yeah, definitely. I feel it's people in this time right now with what's happening right now definitely needed to hear that. So to get some insight. But is there anything else you want to add, Bryan?
Yes, sir. I think I'm good here.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna wrap up the discussion. You have an album of the week, Des?
Nah, no album of the week this week, man, because I've been putting in my last few hours of studying for the LSAT, so I haven't really been bumping too much music this week.
Gotcha. But all
Anthony,
right.
would you happen to have an album for the week? I know you weren't prepared for this, but I know you're a fan of Lauryn Hill, for example. Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, one of your favorite albums.
Oh, no doubt about it. Like probably at the top of the list. So let's see. I'll put this new Kamasi Washington project for the Becoming documentary. Have you listened to this yet? You familiar with Kamasi?
I haven't.
Okay, so that's a you gotta listen to that. Gotta find that. I don't know, man. Lately, are we talking about recent album of the week?
Yeah. It's
Just
always
any.
the one album I listen to the most throughout the week. It's never been the same one, so I'm always playing something new every week.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or whatever you have in your heart.
Thundercat's new project. It is what it is. It is what it is.
I know listen to Thundercat in a minute. I check them out.
All right, Anthony, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We really enjoyed it. Had a great discussion. Please come back.
Oh man, anytime. This is fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my brother.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Having.
And we're going to see you guys next week. Peace.